Hello and welcome to this video series on an introduction to just another statistical program, or JASP. This is video one of a three-part series. During this series, we're going to talk about what is JASP, where to download JASP, talk about the JASP environment, edit and recode data, run different statistical tests, create some visualizations, and learn how to export tables and results out of JASP. In video one, we're going to give an overview of the data scenario. We'll talk a little bit about what JASP is and how to download this depending on what OS you're using. We're also going to talk about how to create new variables and recode existing variables in Excel prior to importing and the reason behind that. We'll give an overview of the JASP environment. We'll learn how to import data, how to save data in a .jasp file type, and then how to change data labels. So this workshop is set to introduce you to the open source program Just Another Statistical Program, or JASP. In this data scenario, we're going to be interested in studying the relationship between the amount of corruption in a country and the quality of their economy. For this question, we're lucky that data already exists. We'll be using the World Development Indicators, which is compiled annually by the World Bank. We'll also be calling World Development Indicators as the WDI dataset. We're using data from a previous year, and I've simplified the dataset, but you can find the full dataset on the World Bank website. We are lucky because World Bank saves the data in such a way that makes it easy to open and easy to use. However, this might not be the case. Other data, such as old census data, can take a lot of effort to transform into a usable format. And there's often no guarantee that someone else hasn't created the data set that you want in advance. So the first step is often in a research project to spend time thinking about the variables you need and the values and the steps needed to create the data that you will need to use. Within the WDI dataset, we're going to focus on the variables corrupt and GDPPC. The variable corrupt is an index of perceived corruption within a country's government. We'll be using country-level aggregated data. However, within the aggregated data, citizens in each country surveyed and asked questions like, would you need to plan bribes to start a local business? This was in a measure of corruption. Note that corrupt is reverse coded. This means that high scores equal low corruption. The second variable is gross domestic product per capita, which indicates how well the economy is doing scaled for the population size of a country. For example, it might not be very interesting to know Botswana produces less than Brazil overall, but it might be interesting to note that Botswana produces more per citizen than Brazil in 2014. Note in that using these variables from the WI dataset, we've given the responsibility of operationalizing these variables of corruption and quality of economy to the World Bank. We've also allowed dynamic concepts to become simple numbers. However, this allows us to move quickly to the later stages of analysis, which has its advantages. So what is JASP? JASP is a completely open source and will always be free statistical program. It allows users to run either frequentist or null hypothetical testing, analyses, or Bayesian statistics. It dynamically updates the results, and you can export annotated APA formatted output, and it's integrated with the Open Science Framework. JASP has a spreadsheet field with an intuitive point-and-click option, and you can download it on your dataset by going to jasp-stats.org. It can work on several different platforms. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Download. You can download it for Windows, Mac, or there's also Linux. You can also run it in your browser, but it has some limited options using a different third-party application. So there are some limitations here too. If you're interested in using JASP, there's also several resources that are referred to back in the workshop documentation. This includes Getting Started with JASP, which is a nice little how-to manual. There's resources on teaching with JASP, everything from manuals, data libraries, websites, teaching material that's part of the Open Science Framework. There's also how to use JASP with different frequentist analysis and Bayesian. There's blog posts, videos, and GIFs for a number of these different options. And there are actually quite a large number of options here too to choose from. And there's also JASP materials. So there's different user manuals that are also completely free. So before we begin, it's important to get familiar with JASP, and we're going to talk about the different menus. But first, before we do that, we have to actually make a couple of modifications to our data set. The WDI dataset comes in an Excel sheet. Now JASP, we need to enter this in as a .csv file type rather than an XLSX file. So what I'm going to do first is we're going to open up our dataset. That's the cs.xlsx. I'm going to open that up. I'm going to go ahead and click on Enable Editing. Then I'm going to go to File, Save As, and I'm going to change this from a .xlsx to a CSV UTF-8, delimited file type. And I'm going to go ahead and click on Save. I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this. And then I'm going to go ahead and move our CSV file version over. This just makes it a more portable format. That way JASP can read this. Now, before we import this data into JASP, we need to create some new videos or some new variables. The creators of JASP have some basic computing and transformations that can be done, but they purposely did not add advanced features since Excel is very powerful. So we're actually going to be creating some variables, so recoding a variable and creating a categorical variable from a continuous variable in Excel first before importing this into JASP. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and open cs.csv. And you can go ahead and ignore this option. So right now, the dataset's in a tidy format. The first row is all variable names, so all one word. They start with a letter. There's no special characters. Each row is a separate country. What we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and column V, the first row, we have to give this a variable name. We're going to recode corruption so that higher scores mean higher perceived corruption. So in V, I'm going to type out the word corruption 2. That's going to be our reverse coded corruption score. In cell 2V, so that's column V, the second row, we're going to enter a formula. We're going to type in equals IF parentheses capital H2. That's our original corruption score for this row. Less than symbol, greater than symbol, double quotes, comma, 10 minus H2, comma, double quotes, parentheses. What this is saying is essentially saying if it's not missing, then go ahead and take 10 minus H2. So with this first one, 10 minus 2.5, since it's not missing, that's going to go ahead and return a 7.5. Otherwise, keep it as missing. This way, if there's any missing values, like row 5 here, it's not going to go ahead and just keep it as a 10. That way we make sure that we're keeping missing as missing. So I'm going to go ahead and press enter. And now that's actually gone ahead and that's created our reverse coded items. I'm going to go ahead and press copy. I'm going to hold down this and just highlight everything below this row, go all the way down to our last row with data, which is 218, and click on paste. What this has done is this carried over that formula for every single row. If there's missing in H2, it went ahead and carried over that missingness. And note how within this, we have to make sure it's one word and it cannot start with a number. So this is a quick way within Excel to reverse code and still maintain missingness if there's a missing value here. What we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and create a discrete variable, a discretizer variable, from continuous to grouping. This helps with interpretation. So rather than talking about corruption, which goes from 0 to 10, let's say we're talking about a 7.2 versus a 7.5 versus 7.6. That might not be as intuitive to interpret compared to countries with low versus medium versus high levels of corruption. So this makes it a little bit more easy to interpret. Now a downside to this is that you lose variability. So essentially, let's say we have a bin, like a group that goes from 0 to 3.3. We're treating every of the values within there, all those countries within those, as the same. So a 0.2 is going to be equivalent to a 3. So you lose variability. So we're going to go ahead and create a categorical variable, and we're going to essentially group our continuous new corruption2 variable, which is reverse coded. We're going to group it into, put it into 3 mutually sized bins that are mutually exclusive, and then going to go ahead and do that to create high, medium, and low. So let's go ahead and column W, I'm going to type out corrupt underscore categ, which is short for corruption categorized. In cell W2, so that's row 2, column W, I'm going to type out an operation that says if or equals if parentheses v2 less than symbol, greater than symbol. And this is going to be our first bin. So if it's missing, comma, if parentheses v2 is less than 3.34, comma, 1. So if it's less than 3.34, give it a 1, comma, else if, essentially, if it's not that, we're saying, okay, v2 is less than 6.67. Give that a 2. And if it's not that, if v2 is greater than or equal to 6.67, give it a 3, and then closing that parentheses, another parentheses, and another, comma, double quotes, and parentheses. So that's saying if it's missing, keep it as missing essentially. So I'm going to go ahead and press enter. Now looking at this, because this second row here, our first country, has a 7.5 score, they'd fall in that third bin. It's greater or equal to 6.67 up to the maximum of the scale, which is 10. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to copy that cell, and I'm going to click on it, and then while holding it down, drag it all the way down to the bottom there, and then I'm going to click on paste. I'm going to give it a quick check. So 8 is in the third group. 1.2, that's below a 3.34, they're going to get a 1. A 4.2, that's going to get, since it's less than 6.67 but greater than 3.34, that's going to be a 2. If it's missing, it's still missing. So this is exactly what we want. So I'm going to go ahead now I'm going to go ahead and file, save. And I'm going to close this out. So we've created a categorized variable, 1, 2, and 3. 1 is low, 2 is medium, 3 is high. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up JASP. Now that the variable's been created, we can import them into JASP. And if, let's say you wanted to create variables or make transformations after importing the dataset, JASP has some limited options to edit data by opening up the data in Excel and syncing changes. So this is the main interface. This sandwich, I'm going to call this a hamburger, and that has some different options. So once we've opened up data or imported it, we can actually go ahead and there's a sync data file. And that way you can actually make transformations. We're not going to use that for this one though. But to start, we're going to click on File, Open. I'm going to go to my computer. And I'm going to go ahead and browse, go to Desktop, and there's our cs.csv file. I'm going to click on Open. And now we actually have our same data set. If it's missing, it's still missing. It's noted that zeros and ones. It's actually noted those as categories. Everything else is continuous. If we scroll over, we have our 3 categories of corruption categ, our reverse coded corruption 2. This all looks great. Let's go ahead and save this as a .jasp file type. I'll click Save As, Desktop. Now I'm just going to call this cs.jasp. So when I minimize this, let me go ahead and move this over. Here is our JASP data file. Now what I do is going back into JASP, let's go ahead and we're going to add some data labels. So let's say I wanted to add data labels like SPSS. So a 3 is going to say hi instead of a 3. So we're just adding a value label on top of this. I'm going to click on corruption category, the name, and you see what says filter 1, 2, 3. Those are the values. I'm going to click on where it says label 1. I'm going to type in low. For medium, or for 2, I'm going to call that medium. And high, I'm going to call that high. And it's already went ahead and it's adjusted all those to it. So I'm going to go ahead and click X out of here. And so now we have our high, medium, low with the categories. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to go ahead and click on Save again. This concludes the first video. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about running some statistical tests, some descriptive statistics, and creating some visuals. We'll see you in the next video.